President Obama says Iraq will need more help, and he says the Obama administration is not ruling out any options, although one top U.S. official is making it clear the U.S. is not considering sending troops in. Let's go to our White House correspondent, Michelle Kosinski. She's got the very latest from there. Michelle?
Hi, Wolf. The president himself today and his administration call this an emergency situation, saying that they are weighing options, evaluating requests. Now, we do know that those options include airstrikes that the Iraqi government has been asking for, but do not include, they emphasized, boots on the ground. Today, the vice president talked to the Iraqi prime minister and said that the U.S. is prepared to accelerate and intensify its support. Here's the president today.
Iraq's going to need more help. It's going to need more help from us, and it's going to need more help from the international community. So my team is working around the clock to identify how we can provide the most effective assistance to them. I don't rule out anything.
So not ruling out anything except sending American soldiers back to Iraq. Now, there was harsh criticism today from some of the sources you might expect it from. Senator John McCain saying that the president needs to fire his entire national security staff. Speaker Boehner saying that this has been a problem that's been brewing for more than a year. We've seen it coming. And what has the president been doing? He said, taking a nap. The administration wouldn't respond directly to that criticism, but they did reiterate this theme that we've been hearing a lot about, that some call the Obama doctrine, that the U.S. can't be doing everything all the time, and that countries like Iraq need to take responsibility for their own security, Wolf.
Michelle Kosinski with the latest from the White House. Thanks very much. Let's dig deeper right now with former Pentagon official Colin Kahl, retired U.S. Army General George Jalwan. He's the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. Zalmay Khalilzad, he's the former U.S. ambassador to both Iraq and Afghanistan, and Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times. Nick, first of all, this is such a complex situation. Explain in a nutshell why seemingly Iraq has exploded like this in recent days.
You're talking to me, Wolf?
Yes, Nick.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have a combination of, it's partly related to what has happened in Syria, and you've had these extremist groups like ISIS coming from Syria and able to use that base to push into Iraq. And then on top of that, now you've had the Kurds seize Kirkuk, the oil city there. And then the Iraqi army has just simply fallen apart, you know, partly because the government of al-Maliki had overreached in recent years. And so everything that has been in the works for a long, long time has suddenly come together in the last few days, and all of Iraq at this point simply is just fragmenting.
Because, Colin, when you think about it, this Iraqi army, hundreds of thousands of troops, largely U.S. trained, largely U.S. equipped over many, many years. You have the second largest city, Mosul, nearly 2 million people live there. Their job is to take responsibility, protect that city. What do? The Iraqi military, they take off their uniforms, they put down their guns, and they run away in the face of, what, a few terrorists coming in. What's going on here?
Well, I think it's probably more than a few terrorists. I mean, one of the things that ISIS has developed is that it's not just a few ragtag bands. We're talking about thousands of seasoned fighters. But you're right, the Iraqi security forces are about 600,000 strong. They were trained by U.S. forces, but frankly, for the last couple of years, a lot of them have been doing checkpoint duty, not a lot of counterinsurgency, and some of the others are just exhausted. So I think morale is low, and some of the blame goes to the al-Maliki government for not doing enough to maintain the professionalism of the Iraqi security forces.
Yeah, I think a lot of the blame goes to Nouri al-Maliki because he has refused so far. Ambassador Khalilzad, you know this, he has refused really to bring in Iraq's Sunni population into that regime. He wants it to be a Shiite-led government, period.
Well, he's had a hard time in the last several years to work with Sunnis and Kurds. There was always a problem between Shia and Sunni, but he's added to it now the disagreement with the Kurds. So to solve this problem, I think there is a need maybe for a new leadership in Iraq to be able to work with all the political forces because the military action alone isn't going to be sufficient without a political strategy and leadership that can mobilize, can motivate the soldiers.
General Jalwan, you know the president, the commander-in-chief, he's got a major decision to make right now. Does the United States get back involved militarily in Iraq? No troops on the boots on the ground, as they say, but should the U.S. start launching airstrikes, start providing intelligence, start providing a lot more equipment? Is this the U.S. responsibility now?
I would say the clarity here is to do what? What do we want to do? And I think it should be measured. We ought to be very careful. I think the Iraqis may get some spine here and be able to really take on ISIS as it advances. I think there's some weaknesses in ISIS that they could take advantage of. I've met some very good Iraqi commanders. And so I think we ought not to panic here. We ought to wait to see what the Iraqis do. And I think our support ought to be not troops on the ground. I think it should be intelligence. It should be information that we can give them. I would caution against airstrikes.
Because, Nick, as you know, and you've written a lot about this, you've been there. I spoke earlier in the day with Fareed Zakaria. He says any U.S. military support would effectively be seen as support for Nouri al-Maliki, the prime minister of Iraq in this particular case. And as long as he's in charge, it doesn't make sense for the U.S. to get involved militarily. I heard a similar comment from Adam Schiff, a Democratic congressman from California, a member of the Intelligence Committee. He's not ready to support military action. Are you?
No, I'm not. I mean, I think that U.S. military assistance in some form may be necessary to make a difference, but it's not sufficient. The central part of resolving the crisis is essentially sharing power. And, you know, maybe it is possible for Maliki to stay in power in part, but he's got to share it, and power has to devolve from the center to the regions as well. And we have some leverage right now, perhaps, to help make that happen. And if that does happen, then perhaps some airstrikes may be useful in conjunction with that. But simply to provide military assistance of one form or another without that happening, I think, would not achieve anything.
Colin, what do you say to Senator McCain, Senator Lindsey Graham, others, the Republican critics of the president, blaming him for this deterioration, saying the U.S. withdrew without leaving any troops there? This was all predictable.
Well, you know, I don't think that our intelligence community was predicting it at the end of 2011, whether Senator McCain and Senator Graham were. Look, I think the truth is that President Obama ultimately was willing to leave 3,000 to 5,000 forces behind.
Would that have made a difference?
It might have. It might have strengthened the logistical backbone of the Iraqi security forces, provided some enhanced counterterrorism support and maybe some air support. But the fundamental thing is, Wolf, that we wanted to make sure they had the same legal protections the Bush administration negotiated in 2008, and the Iraqis simply weren't willing to give those to us, largely because they believed they were in a stronger position. The Iraqis believed that they could make do without us. They wanted us to stick around, but they weren't willing to pay a political price for it.
Ambassador Khalilzad, what role is Iran playing in all of this?
Well, Iran is playing a significant role. Our withdrawal made Maliki more dependent on Iran, and the Syrian situation unraveling led to Maliki, because of influence of Iran, siding with Bashar, and now the Syrian opposition siding with Maliki's opposition. So I think the role of Iran is important. I agree with Nick that any role that we play in terms of assistance, it has to be conditional on a political deal. Even if it requires a different leader in Baghdad, that's absolutely necessary for any military operation.
I don't see a different leader in Baghdad anytime soon, do you?
No, nor do I. But I think it's going to be essential that the Iraqis do this. We cannot always come in and bail out at the 11th hour. The Iraqis have got to get some organization here, politically, militarily, diplomatically. And I think the Kurds are going to play a key role in all of this.
Yeah, well, there's relative calm, peace in Kurdistan, but hopefully it'll spill over. I don't see it spilling over yet. I want all of you to hold your thoughts because we're not going away from this subject. Let me thank you, though, for this portion of our show. Colin Kahl, Nick Kristof, General Jalwan, Ambassador Khalilzad. Guys, thanks very, very much. Up next, new images, new information emerging on the humanitarian crisis on the U.S. border as thousands of kids are crossing over on their own without their parents, and they are now facing very difficult conditions. Why one U.S. state is now threatening to sue the federal government. And what's the best way to celebrate turning 90? Look at this. A former U.S. president shows it's never too late to jump out of a plane.